David Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's good to follow the honourable member for Buckingham, and I agree with everything he has said, and said with great passion. The day the Downey case fell in the courts in the Old Bailey was a very sad day indeed for British justice. Not only was a terrorist released onto the streets again, but families who had lost loved ones were left with no recourse because the government has said there is no course of appeal. And the old wounds were all opened up again. The exposure of the on-the-runs, or OTRs as it's known, administrative scheme and royal prerogatives, were a stab in the heart of our British values of justice. The entire scheme was based upon a lie. Its creators claim that the early release scheme in the 1998 Good Friday Agreement created an anomaly for those who were on the run. It did no such thing. There were many fundamental problems with the Belfast Agreement, and that is why the Democratic Unionist Party rejected it and negotiated the new St Andrews Agreement. However, it did have a clear mechanism for dealing with pre-1998 offences. A person could be brought before the court, receive a fair trial, and if convicted, serve time in jail. The sentence would have been a mere 2 years, thanks to the likes of the Ulster Unionist Party and the Progressive Unionist Party, who signed the 1998 Pact. But victims would have at least have had their day in court and an opportunity for justice to be done. This conspiracy drew in a range of our institution by acts of commission and omission. Parliament was bypassed and misled. The legislation for OTRs at that stage was withdrawn because it was unwanted both by Parliament and by the public. It was rejected because it was repugnant, but at least it offered some level of oversight and licensing to prevent reoffending. The government and the NIO, that's the scheme that they come up with, did none of this. Their contempt for Parliament included deliberately misleading it and all political parties except Sinn Féin about how they were dealing with the OTRs.
Would the honourable gentleman just allow me?
I will, yes.
Thank you. Most grateful. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Most grateful to the honourable member for allowing me to intervene on it. Will the honourable member just take this opportunity to confirm that the obnoxious Northern Ireland Defences Bill, while all of the parties objected to it, the government then in power would have pushed that piece of legislation through this House had it not been that Sinn Féin belatedly registered their opposition to that bill, right. And in fact it was dropped because of its opposition, not the overwhelming opposition of the general public, RUC widows and others.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the honourable lady from North Down is absolutely right. She's absolutely right in that statement. But no unionist would be surprised by the then Northern Ireland office's role in the design and implementation of this scheme. For at that time their pandering to republicanism and contempt for unionism and its representatives were a permanent feature of direct rule. However, they drew the police service of Northern Ireland into their dirty deals as well. In a question to SEC, I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was SEC Harris, that my colleague on the policing board, Mr Thomas Buchanan, had asked a question on the OTRs. And the response from the PSNI was, at this moment in time, there are no on-the-runs we are aware of residing in Northern Ireland, and if there was information to suggest there were individuals who are wanted for crime living within this jurisdiction, then we would be very anxious to learn of that. That was 2010. This gave the impression, the desire to catch criminals when the scheme was doing exactly the opposite.
Remember to play.
I will go away.
Thank you, honourable friend, for giving way. Remember, go further. He knows that the former ex-deputy chairman of the police board, Mr. Bradley, has publicly stated that the policing board was briefed about on the runs and knew rightly all about it. You go further today and dismiss that as fantasy from that member.
Yes, I certainly would. Absolute fantasy. And the evidence over the past number of weeks coming from representatives in the policing board would confirm that. In the same time period as this OTR scheme was running, the PSNI established the Historical Inquiry Team, the HET. This was supposed to be a symptomatic approach to give every victim the opportunity of justice. The OTR scheme now draws a long shadow over all of the work of the HET. Some will conclude that as one section of the PSNI tried to put people before a court, another was helping them to avoid it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't want to be too long because I know there's a lot of other speakers
Well, would the
to speak.
allow me to take
Well, I want to move on at this stage because there's a lot of people that want to speak, so I apologise to the Honourable Lady. Madam Deputy Speaker, the constituency that I represent is a constituency, those that know Northern Ireland, that has a big contingent of security force personnel, both past and present. And in my discussions with those individuals and organisations, they are totally disgusted at this scheme because their attitude is they took courage, they put on the uniform of the Crown Forces to defend the people and to defend Northern Ireland, and if someone in their organisation stepped out of line, the full rigour of the law was brought upon them, and they emphasised, rightly so. But we have people who have been on the run. They weren't away on their holidays. They were on the run because they had a conscience of what they had done, and they get letters to give them reprieve. It's one law for one organisation, and it's one law for another. It's despicable. It has opened a can of worms. The last point, the royal prerogatives. It would be very interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, to discover who have received or who has received the royal prerogatives. Because is it Mr. McGuinness has received one? Mr. Adams? Mr. Kelly? Go further. As the House knows, and I've mentioned it before, a number of my own family were assassinated by the IRA. Has some of those people that carried out those murders received the royal prerogative? It's disgusting. It's wrong. The victims out there are suffering. We promised the victims justice.
Yeah, I see it.
A lot of them will never see it. And I'm glad that both inquiries have now opened. We're looking forward to the Select Committee inquiry, which will go into every nook and cranny. And we will, at some stage, discover who initiated it, who and when allowed this to happen.